Years later, Keanu Reeves stood quietly at the gate of an old countryside home. The evening light touched the wooden walls and the smell of rain filled the air. He did not plan to stop here, but something about this house pulled him in. It was the same house where years ago, during a small film shoot, he and Sandra Bullock had shared some of the most honest and unspoken moments of their lives. Standing there now, he felt a rush of memories he thought he had buried. He had not seen Sandra for years. Their lives had gone in different directions. There were times when their paths almost crossed, but something always held them back. Careers, schedules, choices, and perhaps fear of facing what was left unsaid. The house reminded him of those fragile silences between them, silences that spoke louder than words. Inside the house, Sandra was sitting by a window holding a cup of tea. She had returned there after so many years, not knowing Keanu would be standing outside. She came for peace, for quiet, for answers to questions she never dared to ask herself. When she heard the soft sound of footsteps on the wooden porch, her heart paused. The door creaked open and she saw him, Keanu, older, gentler, but still carrying the same quiet strength in his eyes. There was a long silence between them. Neither spoke at first, because words felt too heavy for that moment. The years of distance, of missed chances, all seemed to hang in the air. Finally, Sandra placed her cup down and whispered, "You came back." Keanu looked at her, his voice low and steady. "I didn't mean to. But I think the house remembered us." Sandra's eyes softened. It was not just the house. It was their story, left unfinished, waiting in the walls and in the air. Memories flooded back. The laughter they once shared, the long drives after shoots, the nights they stayed awake just talking about life, about fears, about dreams. Those memories had never really left. They had only been sleeping, waiting for this moment to wake again. The house was quiet, but their hearts were not. Keanu walked slowly across the room and sat down across from her. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. "It feels strange," he said softly, "like time didn't move inside here." Sandra nodded. "But we did, and we lost pieces of ourselves along the way." There was pain in her voice, but also truth. Life had tested them both. Keanu had faced loss, loneliness, and battles within himself. Sandra had carried her own struggles, heartbreaks, and responsibilities that left scars no one could see. Yet, in that moment, they both felt the same thing. Somehow, even through years apart, they had always been holding on to each other in silence. A storm began outside, rain hitting the windows like whispers from the past. The sound pulled them deeper into memory. Sandra remembered the night long ago when she almost told him what was in her heart, but stopped because she feared it might break the friendship they had. Keanu remembered how he once reached for her hand under the stars, but let go before she noticed, afraid it would change everything. Now, years later, both wondered the same question. What if they had been braver back then? The storm outside grew louder, as if demanding them to face what they had run from. Keanu looked into her eyes and said, "We can't change the past, but maybe we can still listen to it." Sandra felt tears rising. There was sorrow, but also a strange kind of hope, she whispered. "Maybe the past brought us here, so we don't lose the future too." The room filled with silence again, but this time it was not empty. It was full of meaning, full of chances, full of something new. The house had called them back, not just to remember what was lost, but to decide if love, once silent, could still speak again. And in that quiet home, with the storm wrapping around them, their story began to move once more. The rain outside did not stop. It pressed harder against the glass windows, like nature itself wanted to push them into speaking more than their guarded words. The old house seemed alive, holding their secrets, waiting for them to open doors that had been locked for too long. Keanu sat with his back straight, his hands resting on his knees, but his eyes betrayed him. They showed longing, regret, and a softness that came only when someone carried unspoken love for years. Sandra leaned back in her chair, her tea now cold, untouched. She remembered something he once said many years ago, a small phrase that stayed in her heart, even when oceans of silence separated them. Kindness keeps us alive even when love feels too heavy. He had said it casually then, after helping a young crew member fix a broken camera, but she carried it like a treasure. Looking at him now, she realized he was still that same man, kind before anything else, and it hurt her to know she had let him walk out of her life. "Do you ever wonder?" she asked softly, almost afraid to hear the answer. What would have happened if we had spoken the truth back then? Keanu's eyes lowered as if the weight of years pressed down on him. He nodded slowly. "Every day. But I also wonder if we would have broken each other by rushing. Maybe the silence was protecting us, or maybe it was just fear wearing a mask." The honesty in his voice reached her deeply. She looked around the room, remembering the night they had both sat in the same spot, the night she almost placed her hand over his. That night the fire in the old fireplace had been warm, and his quiet smile had told her everything words could not. Yet she had turned away, telling herself it was safer to keep what they had unspoken. Now, in this storm, there was no fire, only the raw truth between them. Sandra rose slowly and walked toward the dusty bookshelf against the wall. She ran her fingers across the wooden frame and found an old photograph tucked inside a forgotten book. Her heart skipped when she pulled it out. It was from years ago, the two of them smiling together, the world unaware of what was unspoken in that smile. She turned it toward him. Keanu took the photo in his hand and held it carefully, as if it were glass that could shatter. He stared at it for a long time, his face unreadable. Finally, he whispered, "We look so free." "I don't know when I stopped looking like that." Sandra stepped closer, her voice shaking. "You never stopped. You just carried too much weight alone." The storm cracked louder, thunder echoing like a warning. Their silence grew heavier, but not empty. It was filled with all the almosts that haunted them. Keanu stood and walked slowly to the window, watching the rain. His reflection stared back at him, older now, but his heart felt like it was still standing in the same moment from years ago. "I lost people I loved," he said quietly, his tone almost breaking. "And every time I thought of who I wanted to call, who I wanted to sit with in the dark, it was you. Always you. But I never did because I thought maybe you had moved on. Maybe my silence was better for you." Sandra's breath caught. The truth hit her chest like a wave. All these years she thought she was the only one who carried that weight, but now she realized he had been living in the same silence. She stepped closer to him, her words trembling. "And I thought the same. I thought maybe if I told you, you would feel trapped, so I kept quiet. I buried it under work, under responsibilities, under everything. But it never left me." "You never left me." Keanu turned to her then, his eyes shining with the storm's reflection. For a moment they stood face to face, closer than they had been in years. The air felt electric, charged with both pain and hope. A sudden memory rushed into Sandra's mind. Years ago, after a long day of shooting, Keanu had driven her home. It was late. The city lights flickered outside, and the radio played a soft song. When they reached her house, she had opened the door to leave, but he had sat still, holding the steering wheel tightly, as if fighting with himself. She remembered wanting him to stop her, to say something. But instead, he only smiled and whispered, "Good night." She carried that silence for years, always wondering what he wanted to say, now staring at him in the old house. She knew the answer had been love all along. They heard the sound of something falling in the next room, breaking their intense silence. The storm had pushed wind through a crack, knocking over a vase. The sudden noise pulled them back into the present, reminding them that time was moving, that life was asking them to choose, stay silent again, or finally speak. Keanu picked up the fallen vase, his fingers brushing against hers as Sandra bent to help him. The small touch sent a shiver through both of them, a reminder of everything they once denied. He looked at her, his voice steady but tender. "Maybe we can't fix the past, but maybe we can stop running from it." Sandra felt tears roll down her cheeks, but she did not hide them. She whispered, "Maybe this house brought us back so we wouldn't keep running anymore." Their hands stayed close, not moving away this time. Outside, the storm began to soften, as if the world itself was listening and waiting for what came next. The old house, the rain, the silence, and their hearts all carried the same truth. Love Once buried was now rising again, asking to be heard. The storm had calmed, but the air inside the house was still heavy. The rain slowed to a whisper on the roof, like the world itself was giving them space to speak. Sandra sat back down on the old chair, her hands pressed against her face, hiding her tears. Keanu stood near the window, his shadow stretching across the floor, torn between moving closer and staying where he was. There was a silence, but it was not the silence of strangers. It was the silence of two hearts that had known each other too long to pretend. Both were waiting, afraid of the next step, afraid of breaking something fragile. Yet both knew this moment had been waiting for them for years. Sandra finally lowered her hands, her voice soft and trembling. "Do you know what hurts the most? It isn't that we didn't say the words. It's that I let myself believe maybe it was only me, that I carried something you never felt." Keanu turned, his face etched with pain. "And I thought the same. I thought maybe I would ruin your life if I told you. I thought maybe you deserved someone lighter, someone who didn't carry so much sorrow. So I stayed silent." Her eyes widened as his words sank deep. She wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, but instead she rose and walked to the table where an old journal lay. It was hers, left behind years ago during the film shoot. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling, and found a page marked with faded ink. She read aloud, her voice shaking. "He makes silence feel safe. He doesn't even know what he does, but when I'm around him, the world feels less heavy. I think I could love him, but I don't know if I'm brave enough." Keanu's chest tightened. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if holding back years of regret. When he opened them again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "You wrote that about me?" Sandra nodded. "I wrote it the night you drove me home. The night you said goodnight but didn't say what was in your eyes." Keanu's hands shook slightly. The memory burned fresh. "That night, I almost told you. I almost asked you to stay in the car. I almost said I loved you, but I thought maybe you would walk away if I did." She stepped closer, her tears falling freely now. "And I thought if I told you first, maybe you would run. So I stayed quiet. We both stayed quiet." Their eyes locked, and for the first time in years, there was no wall between them. The house felt smaller, pulling them closer. Keanu took a deep breath, his voice heavy with emotion. "I don't want to live in almost anymore. I don't want the rest of my life to be filled with what if." Sandra's lips trembled. "Neither do I, but can we really start now after so many years? What if it's too late?" The question hung in the air, sharp and painful. Keanu walked to her slowly, step by step, until he was standing only inches away. Maybe it's late, but maybe it's not too late. Maybe this house gave us one more chance. Before she could reply, lightning flashed outside, illuminating the room. In that flash, their faces showed the weight of years, their losses, their loneliness, their buried love. Then came a knock at the door. Both froze, their eyes snapping toward the sound. The storm had kept the world away, but now someone was here, breaking the moment. The knock came again, firmer this time. Sandra wiped her tears quickly, whispering, "Who would come here? No one even knows I'm staying." Keanu's jaw tightened. He walked carefully toward the door and opened it. A man stood outside, drenched from the rain, holding a package wrapped in plastic. His face was lined with age, his clothes worn, but his eyes carried a strange knowing. "This belongs to the house," the man said, handing the package to Keanu. "It's been waiting for someone to open it." Keanu took it, confused. "What is it?" The man gave a faint smile. "You'll see." And then he turned and walked into the misty rain, disappearing as quickly as he came. Sandra came closer, her heart pounding. Keanu placed the package on the table and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a wooden box, carved with delicate patterns. It looked old, fragile, yet full of meaning. He opened it carefully, and inside lay a collection of letters, each sealed in an envelope. Sandra picked one up, her hands trembling. The handwriting was familiar, her own, younger, written during the film days. She gasped. "These are my letters. I used to write them, but I never sent them. I thought they were gone." Keanu lifted another envelope, this one in his own handwriting. His throat tightened. "And these are mine. I wrote to you, too. I wrote when I couldn't say the words." They looked at each other, stunned. All those years, Both of them had poured their hearts into words they never shared, and somehow the house had kept them safe, hidden until this moment. Sandra's tears fell again, her voice breaking. We were both speaking. Just not to each other. Keanu reached out, his hand brushing hers as they held the letters. Maybe now? We can finally listen. The storm outside faded into silence, leaving only the sound of their hearts, beating faster than they had in years. And in that old house, surrounded by words they had once been too afraid to share, the possibility of love was no longer buried. It was alive, waiting to be spoken. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. The letters lay scattered across the table, old paper carrying the weight of years that had passed in silence. Sandra touched one envelope gently, afraid that even opening it might shatter her heart. Keanu stood beside her, his hand hovering close, torn between the fear of what the letters might reveal and the desperate need to finally know. Should we read them? Sandra whispered, her voice filled with hesitation. Keanu's eyes were steady, but there was pain behind them. We spent years hiding. Maybe it's time we face what we were too afraid to say. She nodded, but her fingers trembled as she broke the seal of the first letter. The ink had faded, but the words still carried fire. It was her handwriting, written during the long nights of filming, when her feelings were too heavy to hold inside. She began to read aloud, her voice breaking. Dear Keanu, tonight you looked at me in a way that made my heart stop. I wanted to tell you everything, but instead I smiled like nothing was happening. I'm afraid if I speak, I will lose the only safe place I have, your friendship. So I'll write it here and hide it, because at least on paper, I am brave. Her hands shook as she lowered the letter. She dared not meet his eyes, but she felt his silence pressing on her like gravity. Keanu reached for one of his own letters and opened it carefully. His voice was deep, steady, but heavy with unspoken emotion. Sandra, I drove you home tonight. I wanted to tell you how much you mean to me, but I held back. I think of how the world looks softer when you smile. I think maybe I am already in love with you, but I will keep this letter hidden, because I am afraid if you don't feel the same, I will lose you forever. The sound of his words tore through her heart. She gasped, tears running freely now. Both of them had been carrying the same fear, the same love, the same silence. All this time, she whispered, her voice trembling. We were writing to each other without knowing. Keanu closed his eyes for a moment, his jaw tightening as if to contain the storm inside him. We were trapped by our own silence. And the house. It kept the truth locked away, waiting for us to come back. They sat together at the table, surrounded by their hidden confessions. Page after page revealed the same truth, two people who had loved each other deeply, but never had the courage to cross the line. Each letter was like a mirror of the other, echoing fears and unspoken promises. Yet, in the middle of that painful honesty, Sandra found something that made her heart ache differently. She opened one letter dated years after their time together. It was written in Keanu's handwriting, but the tone was darker, heavier. Her voice shook as she read. Sandra, I saw your picture today. You looked happy, and I told myself that maybe my silence gave you peace. I wish I had been braver, but maybe staying away is my way of loving you. I'll never let you know how much I still think of you. She stopped reading, unable to continue. Keanu reached for her hand, his touch steady, grounding her. I wrote that on a night I couldn't sleep. I thought you had moved on. I thought my silence was a gift, not knowing it was only a chain. Sandra's tears fell onto the page, staining the ink. Do you see what we did? We both thought silence was kindness, but it only left us alone. The old house groaned softly as the wind pressed against its walls, like it too was grieving for the lost years. Keanu rose from his chair, pacing the room as if fighting with himself. We can't get those years back. We can't rewrite what we lost. Sandra stood too, her voice suddenly sharp, filled with the pain of years. But we can stop wasting what's left. Keanu, we already lost so much by staying quiet. Do we really want to lose the rest? Her words cut deep, and Keanu froze. He turned to her, his eyes raw and unguarded. What if we try and fail? What if the silence was the only thing holding us together? She stepped closer, refusing to let the fear win again. No. It was not silence that held us together. It was love. Silence only kept us apart. Their faces were close now, the air between them charged. The storm outside had faded into a calm night, stars peeking through the clouds as if the world was waiting for their decision. Before either could speak again, another unexpected sound filled the house, the faint creak of footsteps upstairs. They froze, their eyes darting upward. The house had been empty for years, abandoned except for their return. Sandra's breath quickened. "Did you hear that?" Keanu nodded, his instincts sharp. "Someone's here." They moved carefully toward the staircase, the old wooden steps groaning under their weight. Each step was slow, suspense stretching tight around them. When they reached the top, the hallway was dark, shadows stretching across the floor. A door at the end of the hall was slightly open. Sandra gripped Keanu's arm, her voice a whisper. "Maybe it's just the house settling." But Keanu shook his head. No, that was too clear. "Someone is here." He pushed the door gently, and inside they saw something that stopped them cold. On the floor, lit faintly by the moon through the cracked window, was a box identical to the one downstairs. Another collection of letters. But these were not theirs. The handwriting on these envelopes was different. Keanu knelt down and picked one up. The name written on the front made his heart pound. It was his. And beneath that, another envelope, this time addressed to Sandra. They looked at each other, shock and confusion mixing with fear. Someone else had been writing to them. Someone else had been part of the silence of this house. But who and why? The mystery of the house had just deepened, and their story was no longer just about what they left unsaid. It was about what someone else had been keeping hidden all along. The moonlight slipped through the cracked window, throwing pale silver streaks across the wooden floor. The second box of letters sat between them, untouched yet burning with questions. Keanu held one envelope tightly, his name written on the front in a hand he did not recognize. Sandra stood frozen, her breath uneven, as if the weight of years had suddenly multiplied. "Who could have written these?" she whispered, her voice sharp with fear. Keanu turned the envelope over, his brow furrowed. "I don't know. But whoever it was, they knew our names. They knew we would come back." The silence in the hallway grew heavy. The house no longer felt like just walls and wood. It felt alive, carrying secrets they were only beginning to uncover. Sandra kneeled beside the box, her hands trembling as she picked up another envelope. Her name was written in the same unfamiliar hand, the letters curved gently, almost tender. She opened it carefully. The paper inside was old, slightly yellowed, but the ink was still clear. She began to read aloud, her voice shaking. "Dear Sandra, I see the way you look at him when you think no one notices. I see how you hide your heart because you are afraid. But you should know, sometimes the greatest love stories are the ones that wait in silence until the right moment. Do not be afraid of love. It is not here to trap you. It is here to free you." Her hands dropped, and the letter slid onto the floor. "This isn't from me. This isn't from you. Who knew this much?" Keanu unfolded his own letter, his eyes scanning the lines quickly. His throat tightened as he read in silence, then spoke. "Dear Keanu, you carry sorrow like a shadow. But I have seen how you look at her. She is not your weakness, she is your light. Do not let your fear of loss keep you from reaching for the one person who makes you whole. You have lost enough in life. Do not lose her, too." His voice cracked on the last line, and he lowered the paper slowly. Sandra's eyes met his, wide and searching. Whoever wrote these, they knew us better than we knew ourselves. The floor creaked again, and they both spun around, hearts racing. But this time, there was no one there. Only silence. Only the dark hallway stretching ahead. Sandra clutched the second box tightly. Maybe someone wanted us to find this. Maybe the house isn't just about our memories. Maybe it was watching us, keeping something safe for us all this time. Keanu shook his head, still overwhelmed. But who could have written these letters? A friend? Someone from the film crew? Someone who saw us when we didn't see ourselves? She thought hard, her mind sifting through years of faces. Then a memory surfaced. An old caretaker of the house, a woman with gentle eyes who used to bring them tea during the shoot. Sandra's heart skipped. There was a woman who worked here. Do you remember her? Mrs. Elena. She always sat quietly in the corner, knitting, as if she wasn't listening. But maybe she was. Keanu's eyes narrowed as he remembered. She was always there, always watching. I thought she was just kind keeping us company, but maybe she saw more than we knew. The realization made the room feel heavier, as if the spirit of the old caretaker lingered in the air. Sandra picked up another envelope and opened it. This one was shorter, more direct. When the time is right, the house will call you back. And when it does, you must not leave without speaking the truth. Because love is not meant to be buried. It is meant to be lived, her voice broke as she finished. Keanu reached for her hand instinctively, and this time she did not pull away. Their fingers intertwined, the warmth of their touch grounding them against the strange mystery pressing in around them. She wanted us to come back, Sandra whispered. She knew silence had trapped us. She knew the house would wait until we were ready. Keanu's grip on her hand tightened, his eyes raw and searching. Then maybe this is our moment. Maybe we were meant to find this together. But we can't just leave it here. We need to read every single one. So they sat on the floor together, side by side, as the night stretched on. One by one, they opened the letters, each filled with quiet observations and gentle truths about them. The writer had seen their secret glances, their unspoken words, the way their hands lingered just an inch too close. It was as if someone had written the story of their love, a story they were too afraid to write themselves. Sandra felt her chest tighten with every word, but also a strange peace settling over her. It's almost like she gave us the courage we didn't have. She gave us back the years we lost by keeping this safe. Keanu nodded slowly, his voice low. But the question is, why now? Why after all these years? Just then, a sudden gust of wind blew through the cracked window, scattering some of the letters across the room. One envelope slid across the floor and stopped at Sandra's feet. She bent down to pick it up, and when she saw what was written on the front, her blood ran cold. The handwriting was the same, but the words were different. It did not say her name. It did not say Keanu's. It said, "To both of you, this is the last truth you must face." Sandra looked at Keanu, her face pale. "This one is for us, together." He took the letter from her gently, his hands trembling. Together they broke the seal and unfolded the paper. The words inside were fewer than the others, but heavier. The house holds love, but it also holds regret. You will not find peace until you ask the hardest question. Why did you wait? Sandra's breath caught. She looked at Keanu, her voice barely a whisper. Why did we wait? The question echoed in the room like thunder, louder than any storm they had faced. The letters had brought them here. The caretaker had given them truth, but now the weight was on their shoulders. They would have to answer it, to each other, or risk losing their second chance forever. The night was almost over, and the stars outside the window were fading into the first light of dawn. The house was quiet now, the storm long gone, but the silence inside was heavy with the question neither Keanu nor Sandra could escape. The final letter lay open on the floor between them, its words echoing in their minds. Why did you wait? Keanu paced the room slowly, his hand rubbing the back of his neck. Sandra sat still, staring at the paper, her fingers clenched tightly together. Both of them had spent years asking themselves that question silently, but never aloud. Now the house demanded an answer. Keanu finally stopped pacing and turned toward her. His voice was low, rough with emotion. I waited because I was afraid. Every time I looked at you, I saw the one person I couldn't bear to lose. And I thought if I told you what I felt, maybe I'd scare you away. So I stayed quiet. I thought silence would protect us. But it didn't. It only broke me more. Sandra's tears spilled over. She took a shaky breath, her voice trembling as she replied. And I waited because I thought I wasn't enough for you. You carried so much pain, and I thought if I told you I loved you, I would only add to your weight. I convinced myself that you deserved someone stronger, someone lighter, someone who wasn't me. So I hid my heart, even though it was beating for you all along. Their confessions filled the room, raw and unguarded. For the first time in decades, every wall between them crumbled. The air seemed lighter, as if the house itself was sighing in relief. Keanu knelt down in front of her, his eyes locked on hers. We wasted years because of fear. But I don't want to waste another second. Sandra, I love you. I have always loved you. Sandra's breath caught. She touched his face gently, her tears mixing with her smile. And I love you, I always did. I was just too afraid to let you see. For a moment, time stood still. The weight of years dissolved into something simple, something pure. They held each other not as two people burdened by regret, but as two souls finally free. Then Sandra whispered something that shook him deeply. "Do you think Mrs. Alina knew? Do you think she left these letters so we wouldn't die with our love still buried?" Keanu nodded slowly, his arms still around her. "I think she knew. I think she saw us when we couldn't see ourselves. And maybe this house, these letters, they were her way of giving us the courage we didn't have." The first rays of sunlight broke through the window, bathing the room in golden light. The house, once filled with silence and ghosts of the past, now felt alive again, like it had been waiting for this moment of truth. They sat together, reading the last of the letters until their eyes grew heavy. But instead of feeling haunted, they felt lighter. Every word was no longer a wound, it was a gift, a reminder that love does not disappear just because time passes. When they finally rose to leave, Sandra paused at the door. She looked back at the old home, her voice soft but sure. "We came here carrying silence, we're leaving carrying love." Keanu smiled gently, his hand in hers. "And this time we don't hide it." As they stepped out into the morning light, the house stood tall behind them, no longer just a building of wood and stone. It had become a witness, a keeper of their truth, a place where silence ended and love began again. And though the world outside would move forward, inside their hearts something timeless had finally come alive. Their story, once broken by fear, was now whole again. Because love, when spoken at last, does not ask why you waited. It only asks if you're ready to begin.